Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And it's Halloween.
I wasn't sure whether it was or not. I figured it had to be all the photos on Facebook of people dressing up.
Yeah, Halloween. And we've gone to see Ring. The original Japanese Ring. Ringu, as we all called it back in the day. And I think that is its proper Japanese name.
Uh-huh.
It's from 1998 and it was remade 4 years later by Gore Verbinski in Hollywood as The Ring, which is the one I've seen. I never saw this, and it was one of these that everyone had heard about it, but everyone sort of knew of Japanese horror, or J-horror, as like the really scary stuff. You know? Like Hollywood was trash, and if you really wanted to be creeped out, it was the Japanese stuff, but no one had ever really seen any of them, from what I could tell. You didn't even know anything about this.
No, as you know, I've never been really interested in horror. I mean, kind of, I suppose in the last decade or so, I've really forced myself to see them, just because, it seems kind of the most critical of genres at the moment and the most vibrant and so on. But, I don't like to be creeped out, so it's never been like a genre that...
But you hadn't even heard of The Ring, or...?
No, I have heard. I obviously did hear about it, and, I also heard about the American remake and so on, but I just... It's not my kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad that I've seen it now, because, I mean, it's been a long time. It's been sort of, 20 years.
Well, I'm going to rely on you, really, because, now that I've seen it, I'm thinking, what was all the fuss about?
I kind of am as well, I must say. I know Horror Guru, but I think you can definitely see its influence. And I think, it came out at around the same time as the Blair Witch Project did as well. So horror kind of changed within a couple of years around the turn of the century. And I think you can see the influence of both of those films enormously in the keeping the scares off screen and the kind of waiting. And what I'd forgotten about The Ring in particular, having seen the remake, was how much of it is a detective story that you're waiting for the scares, and it's actually a mystery.
Yes.
And it's not kind of pounding you with the creepiness all the way through. Not at all. And I think the Hollywood one does more than this.
Oh, right, okay, because I didn't even find this creepy at all, really.
No.
So I didn't find it scary, and I didn't find it creepy. I did... I mean, there were certain things that I found interesting and amusing. I mean, actually, I think it looks very good.
It's a 4K restoration that looks beautiful.
It looks beautiful. And some of the compositions were just very interesting. Right, kind of, the way that the panels of a house always kind of create this V shape. Right, the use of that Japanese architecture, the camera often on the floor, as kind of you expect. But also the way that you have framings within framings within framings that are done by doors and shelving and so on.
The TV screens do that as well. They become mirrors at points in quite creepy ways.
They become mirrors and then they become doorways. So all of that aspect I found really interesting. I found the leads attractive. I thought the mixing of making it like a kind of a supernatural story, I thought all of that was kind of interesting as well. I like that.
I very much like its tone in that respect. I mean, I'm sure there are many precedents for kind of these detective stories that actually turn out to be investigations of the paranormal. I imagine if you go back to the likes of Edgar Allan Poe and what's the bloke who wrote about Cthulhu? Can't remember. But those sort of paranormal writers, I think they all really come down to sort of the normal world turning out to not be as normal as you think, and a kind of investigations kind of leading into that sometimes, I think. So it's not like it's massively original, but I think the tone it sets is really good.
Yes. Though again, I mean, I did find it slow. I also found it superficial. Yeah, like, kind of, for me, often, the better films, there are textures to them, kind of things, or maybe like a different, like maybe a conflict between kind of what the characters are saying and what you're seeing, or the way that the background works with or against kind of the characterization, or like great films have these textures, and I thought this was quite one-dimensional.
I think some of that is quite simplistic here. You kind of it does a lot of sort of seeing some creepy figure in a reflection and then turning around and it's not there.
Yes.
And that's a trope that has been used many times. I don't think it's used enormously effectively here, but I think part of why this film kind of entered the cultural sort of the zeitgeist is that partly I think that it's from a different culture. So in the Western world, it became kind of an artifact of weirdness, and something to be kind of sought out. And rather like the tape of The Ring in the film, it's like the Ring itself is saying that you go, oh, there's this film, and it's about this tape that kills you in 7 days, all that sort of stuff. Like the talk around the film was as kind of contributed as much to its sort of place in the culture as actually the film itself, I think. Because a lot of what's actually going on in it doesn't seem all that... I don't want to be too down there. I mean, it's not like it's not original, but it doesn't seem as special from today's perspective. But maybe that's its influence. Actually, it had a bigger... it affected the way horror went in subsequent years so much. I mean, it does seem to be the kind of the centre point of East Asian horror. And at the same time, or within a couple of years, you had films like Ju-on, The Grudge, that became The Grudge in again American remake. The Eye, which I think was from Hong Kong, and again that had an American remake, and there were a couple of others. So it started, I think, I don't know if it started a revival of Japanese horror or East Asian horror, but certainly it had an impact on. It was like a new people in the Western world started to pay lots of attention to Japanese cinema because of it, and East Asian cinema because of it.
The only thing that I really, really liked was the videotape.
The actual tape itself.
Yeah. So, it was interesting because by this period they could have done a DVD, right? But, they did...
No, not 1998, so it's still quite early.
Is it?
For DVD, that's quite early. I think DVD started in about 94, 95.
Right.
And, people didn't really have DVD players until the early 2000s. So
okay.
Maybe.
Well, then so I was wondering whether it was a conscious artistic choice or whether it was like the dominant form. So if it was the dominant form, then it's less of a, I suppose, of an aesthetic decision. But be that as it may, it still works because the VHS has this graininess, and when you pause it, you can't quite make out what it's saying, and so all of those qualities of VHS are actually kind of built into the narrative. They're kind of made part of the problem that must be solved. That you can't see, or that you can't see clearly, that you can't make out things, that it's blurry, right?
As they're freeze framing it and trying to work through, they can't figure out things, but then they kind of bring up the sound, and that has another impact. And it's not precise. There's something kind of weird to it, and it really struck me very early on that. I wonder how much of this translates to someone sort of 15 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
So you go, okay, so it's VHS. Kids may not have ever used VHS these days. Probably wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't.
So VHS, there's cameras. The photos have to be developed. Imagine that. Sending your photos away and you have to come back a few days later to pick them up in weirdness. But then they do bring in a Polaroid, which gives you a photo in under 30 seconds.
It's a very blurry photo in under 30 seconds.
Which is still, it's not instant. It's not camera phone stuff. Obviously, all the phones are landlines. The thing, receiving a phone call is terrifying in the film.
It's true.
As I suppose it is to young people these days, because they just text.
Yes.
And then they don't want to talk on the phone. But it's really built around what at the time was, as you say, dominant technology. This was just the way people lived, but it kind of you need to readjust to the way things were now. It's weird, but I think it's also got that thing of it makes use of what was at the time dominant technology to bring in its scares. So in kind of.
Bringing it scares. What scares?
Well, okay, bringing the supernatural and the creepiness. So, previously, I think before this, you would have had, books, kind of curses in books and text and things like that. Like it's an updated form of that.
Sure, I mean it's a film that's of its time, and it uses what was dominant and available then. I think one of the things that I suppose I'm trying to make sense of and extract is that it's significant that the husband is a scientist. I think it's significant that she's a journalist. Yeah, so she finds out things. And I think it's significant that the plot revolves around the supernatural, which is, kind of contra science, and also, stuff that you normally can't figure out. That's why it's supernatural. You can't figure it out by reason or normal investigative or hermeneutic processes. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought that there was a kind of an interesting rhyme between the protagonist being a mother, right, and also the central thing about the event is a mother-daughter relationship. So she's got a son, but kind of this is a young girl in the well, and
Sadako.
So I think there's kind of obviously interesting things kind of being put into play there. I haven't quite figured out what they are. I mean, there are some things that are memorable in this film. So the flashback sequences in black and white, with the mother reading minds and so on.
Yeah.
I thought that was very beautifully done. Also, the moment where she goes down into the well and discovers the young girl there and hugs her or, brings her head to her breast. I thought that was kind of very good and touching, and actually I thought it would have more narrative significance subsequently.
So did I.
Because
I thought it would be something like showing this girl the love that she never felt.
Exactly.
And that is what ends the curse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So later when they came, it's because you made a copy instead of the real thing, I thought, well, what a disappointment. You have a much more major theme in play. Right.
I agree, yeah.
And you go for like a kind of a banality like that, really. So that surprised me a little bit. I did find it too slow, kind of. And maybe it's my mood or something, but my mind kept wandering onto other things, like,
I know what you mean.
You're watching and then you're thinking, oh, should I get steak for tonight? I was like, so...
I know what you mean about the slowness. I was all right with it, but maybe I was, maybe it was a difference in mood. Maybe I was just a little more intrigued. But I mean, I was the one who wanted to see this, so I kind of brought you along. Not that you were, reluctant or anything, but I was the one who had a pre-existing interest in it.
Yeah, no, I was happy to see it, and I'm glad I've seen it. I am a bit bewildered by its celebrity, though, or by its fame. I mean,
I think part of it is that the core idea is so compelling. You watch this tape and then in 7 days you die. That is perfect kind of sort of urban myth type stuff. And it's kind of a meme that spreads around.
It's a high concept idea.
Yeah.
You can imagine that in an ad line, right, for the poster. You answer the phone and in 7 days you're dead. I wish that were true of people who answered the phone in the trains. Let's start a curse.
I think that's probably also true of the Blair Witch Project as well that I mentioned. The idea of that being like, it looked surreal, and people for a long time really didn't know whether it was real or not, and whether this was a real tape that had been discovered of this creepy thing. So again, it got into you, got its hooks into you, because it had an urban myth quality to it.
So you think that basically it's a film of its time?
I think it might be. Yeah, I think they probably both are. But they did wield kind of enormous influence, because everything that came after that, I think, started to look and feel different.
Sure. No, and part of the reason why I wanted to see it today is because I know that. I mean, it is kind of like a landmark film. But aside from some graduate student who needs to see it to provide context for a later argument or whatever, I mean, what reasons would you give for someone to see it now who has no professional obligation to see it?
No, I know what you mean. I think it's I think it does have aesthetic appeal still, and I think it is still an interesting. Although I kind of, having seen the remake, although I also saw the remake quite a while ago when it came out of the cinema, but I still had, vague ideas of where it was going to go and that sort of thing. I still found the mystery interesting because I didn't remember all the details, and I didn't know what details might have been changed either. And I think it does have those elements that we always talk about with seeing foreign cinema, where you're just interested to see what the world is like in this other place. That's always interesting.
That is always interesting,
and I think it is here too.
Yes.
But I mean, yeah, I it's certainly not scary. I didn't feel too creeped out.
I mean, it's not scary, nor is it creepy. I must say that, the thing that I found most interesting and appealing about it was that you feel it gives you an insight into some aspect of Japanese culture, which does have to do with the sea, with religion, with the temples, with particular folk tales of the place, right? Kind of, that it gives you a little bit of an in into those things. I think kind of, that's what I got most out of it.
Sure. I suppose there are things that you want more answers on. I mean, I do think that ending is dissatisfying when it becomes this thing of, I made a copy for my ex-husband to see and he watched it and he died. Because to be fair, at the end of the film, you're not absolutely certain that that's necessarily true. It's just something that she asserts.
Wasn't this and the sequel released simultaneously or like really close to each other?
Not that I know of. I don't. I can look at the sequel.
Yeah,
because there was one, but I don't think. I know it's based on a book, and I think there was
It's based on a book, but I also do think that the sequel to this film was released either very close or simultaneously. So
sequel was released the year later.
Oh, the year later, okay.
I don't know if it was. I
okay,
no idea if it was already planned or if it was.
No, the reason why I'm asking is because if they were released very close together, then the problem about the ending is not a problem in the sense that it's got an inbuilt continuity, or,
Well, I mean, I think it still is a problem because it is dissatisfying, as we both said. So, and it does seem to miss that thematic thing. I mean, the thing about the ending here is that, as you say, what the journalist figures out is I made this copy, and that must be what the difference is, and that must be what saved me. But you don't know that for sure, and the film then ends on this kind of cliffhanger thing where she's going to go off and make her son make a copy. Which that's something that you actually see in the remake. But what she's talking about, she says, "What did I do differently to him? What did I do differently? Oh, I made this copy." Well, the other thing that she did differently was that she found the corpse and embraced it. And what we were saying about that being a much more kind of that being much more thematically significant in theory.
And actually, there's a sexist dimension to making this particular choice, because when she's in the well and she hugs the young girl. And you feel like pity and love and, reassurance in that hug. Then afterwards, when she says, "What did I do different?" To her husband that got killed. And then, of course, you have this image of the husband pointing to the suitcase, right? So actually, really, it's the man saving her or, solving that problem for her, right?
I suppose that's one way of looking at it.
For sure it is a way because, kind of... He needn't appear otherwise. You might think she could have solved that herself. Yeah. So, but no, he appears as a ghost, and then it makes you wonder: does she have ESP or supernatural powers? Because I thought she only saw visions when the
other fella who knows that he has psychic powers, is touching the fella. Then she kind of seems to get some residual ESP because of it. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that either. Yeah, it's one of those unanswered.
So things. I didn't like that.
Mind you, I think that if it was something, I don't remember it. I don't remember if it even made it into the remake. I don't recall it doing so. The kind of the idea that these people also have psychic abilities, but I mean, you can certainly imagine in the Hollywood remake or in a Hollywood version, it would be over explained to the point where it has no charm anymore.
Possibly. But anyway.
So I don't mind that being slightly underexplained for that reason. I think it retains a certain charm and mystery about it. What did you think of when it actually did get sort of supernatural and horror sceney? What do you think of the effects and the way it was trying to elicit effects and that sort of thing?
Well, none of them worked on me. I mean, I really, and as you know, I am the most easily scared person, ever, really. So, but I just wasn't.
But apart from not being scared, do you think they were interesting? Do you think it was clever or? The classic scene is where she comes out of the telly.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's an image that stays with you, actually. That is maybe the image in the film for me, actually.
Had you seen it before? Did you know it was coming?
No, not at all.
So it didn't scare you, but it
it didn't scare me, but I thought it was like conceptually brilliant. Yeah, kind of, because then the television becomes a gateway, and not just a repository of image or a distributor of image or a reflector of images.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a
it's
gateway.
Made real at that point.
Yeah, it becomes a gateway from one realm to another or something. I thought that was wonderful.
And that's what's so terrifying. I remember that really scaring me in the original, actually. I think and also it being Hollywood, having a bit more money, it being a few years later, the effects were a little more sort of substantial and believable. But it's not to say it's not believable here. I think it works really well.
Yes. I thought there were things that the film just didn't work out very well, or to my satisfaction anyway. So on the one hand, men, except for the husband, are really quite scummy in this film, yeah? Kind of the old guy is somebody who exploited and took advantage of, the two women, the professor... drowns his own daughter, buries her alive in a well, and it turns out he's not really his daughter, right? So it's like almost like the only good man is the hero who dies.
Yeah.
But actually, I thought all of the interrelationships in the film were not very well developed, right? I thought, for example, the husband's new girlfriend was like,
Well, student, quote unquote.
I think it's clearly a student and his girlfriend, and that was like very badly dramatized, I think. I think the young girls at the beginning were very badly dramatized. It almost felt like a cliche of a Japanese, movie with like these young girls all screaming, I
don't think they're particularly good actors. That may be part of it.
Whether they're good actors or whether the characters are drawn that way, it's a problem with the film. And in either case, I think the director is to blame, right? So if they're not good actors, we should have chosen better, Yeah. If they're underwritten, he should have insisted on kind of giving them more depth. So, yeah. I may be going kind of too far one way because... the fact is, I did like it, and I did find it interesting.
Yeah.
Right? So my thing is just, what was all that fuss about more than...
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't have a bad time watching it. I think the only thing that I said my mind did wander, and it might be my mood, but it also might be that the film wasn't giving my mind or my senses enough to work with, really.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, yeah, I'm glad to have seen it.
So am I. I saw this film the other day, Countdown it's called. I didn't see it with you because I knew it would be trash and you would have no interest and all the rest. I saw it with Matt. And in some respects it's rather like a kind of update of The Ring with new technology. I mean, this does seem to happen. Like, I think Stephen King came out with a novel in, I want to say 2007 or so, called Cell, which I think was about how mobile phones can be scary. And it's like, I think it was a similar sort of thing. And this film, Countdown, it's about an app that counts down your life. And so you download the app and then it says, you've got 85 years left. And you go, hooray! And then some people end up with like 7 hours. And they go, fuck. And, and then they try and escape it and blah, blah, blah. And it was terrible. So I'm not advising anybody to see it. But I also had a really good time because it was so rubbish, because I'm going to spoil it actually. It turns out it's all about a curse, and the curse goes back to like Satan. And if you go to the source code, if you like hack the app and look at all the code, there's loads of Latin in it, and it's a Latin curse from way back when. And there's all this stuff about if you can prove that the devil is a liar by staying alive for 1 second longer than the app says, then the curse is defeated. Rubbish. And there's a priest who's not very good.
Okay.
But
so why are we talking about this?
But the point is, it's like, I think it's still a thing that happens. You know, like people are always looking for new ways to make technology scary. And, you know, they're trying to make ways. I mean, it's not original in any way, this film. So like, it's just taken a load of really normal horror stuff, curses and kind of the devil and stuff like this. And then it's just like gone, okay, now we put it into the latest thing, which is an app from the App Store.
Well, I'm always interested in those things. I mean, I was very interested. I mean, I remember seeing the first Mission Impossible film. And, you know, there's a bit where Emilio Estevez is in a...
he's on top of a lift.
He's on an elevator. And, you know, he's got 6 different spaces, 6 different rooms show up in his laptop. And you think, oh my God, what a fantastic device. You can then... You know, you then have a motivation to go from this room to that room, like kind of, because you've seen it in the computer, now it makes sense of, you know, the various rooms, and you can cut to them as you want, right? So, you know, the existence of a computer changes, you know, how you can tell stories, right? Yeah. And that was the same with, you know, a cell phone and so on. And of course, it was the same with VHS. I mean, this is an example of how, you know, VHS then, you know, allows for different stories and allows for stories to be told differently, really, you know. And like I said, one of the fascinating things is to see how the technology itself, you know, the graininess, the wavy lines, you know, the fact that it doesn't stop very well, you know, but that nonetheless you can fast forward and move backwards and so on. All of that is kind of using the plot of this film in a way that is really interesting, you know. Yeah. And that wouldn't have been possible, like...
No, that's a really good point. It makes good use of the technology upon which it's based. Yeah. To bring in problems or tell its story. Yeah. Yeah.
And to help create that world, you know. So
rather like Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, things like that.
And there's something interesting about how the technology is used narratively and aesthetically. So, you know, you have a difference between the black and white that you see in the videotape and then kind of the black and white images of the past, right? Yeah. Of the mother reading the mind, which is kind of clearly shot in like black and white film. Yeah. Yeah, and it looks like an old movie rather than like a video, right? So all of those things were kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like those flashbacks.
Yes.
They look really cool.
Yes, they
I want to see Videodrome as well, because I've never seen Videodrome, but I'm sure it had something similar with... Didn't it have something similar about something coming out the telly in that?
Oh, I'm gonna forget the plot, but yes. Though I think kind of it's, you know, people being destroyed from the insides or things bursting out of their stomach or...
It's Cronenberg, so probably.
Yeah, so I forget. I mean, I get a lot of those 70s ones mixed up. But yeah, I'd be happy to see that.
I think it was 80s, wasn't it? Videodrome. 84 maybe?
Maybe.
Videodrome. 83.
Right.
There you go. Yeah, so I mean, this also has its precedent. I mean, that's 14 years before this. So, I mean, don't know if it was.
That must have been an influence. And also, wasn't there something about Poltergeist with the child?
That was to do with the telly, right? I don't know if it was to do with video, but it was definitely to do with getting stuck in a telly, I think.
Yeah, but, you know, just like here, the ghost comes out of the telly.
Yeah.
You know, I have a vague memory of that also happening in Poltergeist.
Yeah, I'm sure there was something about being stuck in the telly and that, and it being all snow on the screen and stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap it up here. So, I'm very glad we saw it.
So am I.
It's a wonderful looking restoration. So if this is the kind of film that you're interested in, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity to see it, you know, in its best guise now. I do think that it doesn't quite live up to its reputation for me. But, you know, I'm still very glad I saw it.
Yeah, I think it's clearly foundational to horror that's come since. And for that reason alone, it's worth seeing. But it is also an interesting mystery. I mean, okay, we've gone ahead and spoiled it, all various things that go on in it, but it remains, an interesting, sort of fairly atmospheric mystery, even if it isn't as scary as the hype or its reputation would lead you to believe. Yeah.
Right, so thank you very much for listening. Aside from the many places where you can hear us, which Mike will announce in a moment because I can't remember, our big development is that we are on Spotify now. And actually, you can download or listen to a year and a half of very packed viewing. Yeah, so we're
2 years. Done it for 2 years.
Okay. So, and we've got now close to 200 films, really. Close to 200
this will
podcasts.
be our 180 something.
That's right. So,
we're on Spotify. It was embarrassingly easy to get us on Spotify. I should have done it long ago. It took about 2 clicks.
Okay.
But we're on there now, so you can follow us on there if that's more convenient for you. We're also on iTunes and YouTube and SoundCloud, as I always say. And our social media remains Facebook and Twitter. I'm not gonna go on Snapchat. I don't really understand it.
Okay, I don't know what it is.
No, exactly. It's beyond us. So, in a way, if you're the kind of person who doesn't know what VHS is or what a landline phone is, then this podcast is not for you, because we're also not going to be on any of the Snapchats.
That's a stupid thing to say. You can listen to us on Spotify, and SoundCloud and iTunes,
but we're not on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever Bebo.
We're everywhere.
Anyway, so
thank you very much for listening.
We're on all of those. Cheerio.
Happy Halloween.
Ooh.